So, welcome to Teaching River. Hey, River, you are 1,280 days old. Your next birthday is in 181 days on a Friday, and you're 27 in dog years. So, I am here with Uncle Jesse, and we're going to have a little bit of a talk about fatherhood. How long have I known you?
16 years.
Damn. I think that you have probably a better grasp on Grant in his teen years than I do.
Unfortunately, yes.
So say hi first.
Hi. It's nice to be here in my basement.
Mm-hmm. So basically, you have two little ones, me and Nico, and Mia's 5, right?
Mia is 6.
And Nico's 4. We didn't talk for a long time, so I didn't get a chance to, see the birthing and burgeoning process of a child. But I know them now, and I love them very much. And, so being that I've known you, basically as long as I can remember, I've always considered you yelled at me in the first episode for saying that I don't have friends in high school, but that's because you're family, not friends.
All right, way to redeem yourself.
I've always considered you family. It's kind of crazy now, this is, since we were best, really good friends in high school, which would be probably over 15 years ago, to now be seeing that we're both fathers, we're both have, families, and
we do adult things.
Yeah. And you're about to embark on a very different chapter in your life. So I do want to talk about that a little bit. But what do you think? I'm going to open with a heavy one. What do you think is the biggest lesson you've learned so far as a father?
Oh, damn, you didn't even warm me up.
Nope.
Patience. Patience is definitely important, because you will find yourself on some days, depending on the mood and what's going on in the household and outside the household, you will find yourself on the verge of a fucking nervous breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't stress enough, if I could think of one most important thing, it's patience.
And you have a daughter and a son. Do you think that it is a different process with a different
totally.
gender?
Yeah, totally.
So what have you learned about that?
As much. Honestly, just in my opinion, my household, girls are definitely easier.
Mm-hmm.
She's always the most eager to please. She's always the most, eager to learn. My son tends to test his limits. And he's always wants to push everything to the edge of what he thinks is allowed and not allowed. So, she's a little bit more laid back in that respect. I guess it's that old saying, I hate to, quote my parents, but boys will be boys.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely, yeah, not that it's one of them's really hard and one's really easy. It's just there's definitely a huge difference between the two genders.
Mm-hmm.
And it's noticeable on a daily basis.
So what was, I know for me, when River was born, for example, I didn't quite, I don't think it sunk in for me that I had this responsibility until I had River in my arms, and it was a mentally, it was a great thing, but my brain exploded.
Honestly, I guess it's different for all people, but I don't think it really, fatherhood didn't really sink in. It definitely wasn't when she was born.
Why do you say that?
You do the whole 9 months. If you have time, you read the books, and you learn everything. You listen to the doctors, your parents, everybody, and nothing quite prepares you for that moment where they put her in your arms for the first time. But I don't think fatherhood actually sank in until the age of 2. And
give me more. What is that? What does that
mean? The baby is you're on eggshells in the beginning. You're everything's got to be done a certain way. They can only, drink formula or breast milk or, certain times this, sleep schedule that. And you're just like, there's no interaction really because it's just like this. People are going to kill me for saying it. It's like this alien life form that somebody just put in your arms and, you're like, all right, I got to keep this thing alive. Until that first, to me, it was like the first verbal interaction. Like the first time she said a word and the first time she started asking for stuff and, smiling, on the regular and giving you that look and, then the walking comes. That for me was kind of like when fatherhood started to set in. And I'm not saying that like I wasn't a father.
Yeah.
I was definitely doing all the right things and everything in the beginning, but like, it's almost like it didn't feel like it was a real like living person until like 1 to 2 years old, somewhere in that range.
I can kind of relate only because like when Fallon and I were talking about it, like I start seeing the baby bump and like she was like, started talking to me about things and I was like, well, it's not real yet because her heart isn't beating. And then when I got the video of, because I couldn't go, I was working, but I got the video of the heartbeat, that's when I was like, oh, okay. This is a life now. And then like when she was in my arms, it was even more. And then like now I FaceTime with River pretty regularly. And like I would say even 4 months ago, we'd talk on the phone and stuff and it was just me talking to her. And now she's actually talking to me. Right. She has a straight conversation and that's like
everything changes.
That's like a mind blowing experience because you're like, wow, this is actually a person. Before it was, she was talking for quite some time, but none of it was intelligible or made any sense. And, now it's, she has thoughts of her own and it's fucking, it's crazy.
It hits you at different levels, at different stages. Like first there's the walking, then there's the talking, and then like, the talking evolves to like, I'll never forget the first time, Mia, bye-bye, daddy's got to go to work. And the first time she looks at you and goes, why? And I was like, whoa, like she asked why. And, and then you find the conversations getting deeper and deeper because they're learning, their brain's evolving. It was probably a little different for my son just because, by the second kid, you've been through it all already. So you kind of know what to expect. But, it definitely a wild ride when like, intelligent thought started forming.
So on that, like, how do you feel? I don't know if I'm gonna ever have another kid. I'm not against it, but I certainly wouldn't want to even consider that until I have a relationship with River. But like, what do you think? What was the difference of the process? I'm sure that was the stress is probably totally different because you know what you're doing.
By the second kid, everything's just routine. And, the first kid, you're walking on eggshells, everybody's putting hand sanitizer on, and, you're prepping the car for 20 minutes before you leave. It's like, yeah, shit, the second kid, you're just throwing everything around, and, you take them. Mm-hmm. Everything is a lot more, I don't want to say lapsadaisical, but, you're not ignoring the second kid, but it's just more routine.
Yeah.
You're not nervous anymore. You're not walking on eggshells anymore.
So River doesn't know. Let's rewind a little bit to young Jesse. Explain to me your household growing up. Because you have a sister, so both of us grew up in a 2-family nuclear home. What was that?
I was raised in that Italian family-oriented household. My parents are Catholic, raised by a cop. It was strict, but it wasn't like over strict. Like it wasn't like military school, but it was definitely. When we were young, like the difference between my parents and your parents was pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
You're not saying your parents were lapsadaisical, but they definitely gave you a lot more freedom than my parents gave us.
Well, you're the first child, so too. Yeah. I'm second, so I by then it's slightly different.
Yeah, luckily for my parents, I was actually the good one.
Yeah, surprisingly.
My sister is younger than me. She's 3.5 years younger than me. She gave them a run for their money. So I didn't break them in properly. They weren't ready for her.
So raising, like being, I've known your parents for a very long time. I've never ever had an interaction with them about their religion. What is...
I don't know. It's weird, man. Italians, it's almost like when you're Italian, it just comes with the territory to be Catholic.
Are you
Like,
raised with God in your life?
we had to go to, when you're Catholic, there's sacraments that you have to fulfill at different ages. And you go to like a, 1 day a week school to like teach you how to perform all these sacraments. We used to dread it, man. It was called CCD.
Mm-hmm.
And you were going with like the same kids you went to school with, whosever's families were Catholic and wanted their kids to go through all the sacraments. But like,
Well, I don't know what a sacrament is because I was never
it's
raised
like
with
different
this,
stages of the religion. Like with any religion, there's always different.
so like communion and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're born. They baptize you. First Holy Communion, reconciliation. It's when you like confess your sins. I don't know. In like at 10, 11 years old, I don't know how many sins you've actually committed to sit in front of a priest and confess your sins. It's like what have you possibly done? You know. Like religion was just once CCD was over and the sacraments were completed, other than marriage, because that's like the final.
Yeah.
It wasn't like heavily enforced. Like my parents weren't those Catholics that went to church every single Sunday. We went to public school, but it was definitely like always in the background.
What do you now with the God that you're raised with in your family? How do you feel? What do you have a God? Do you have a religion? Do you have a faith at all?
Touchy subject.
Okay.
I definitely agree with some form of higher power. I would say in my older years, I kind of strayed away from religion a little bit. In my entire family, my mother's side and my father's side, my kids are the first two kids to not get baptized.
That was going to be one of my questions of whether or not you did that, and so why didn't you do that?
So, here's the thing: like being raised Catholic, you know the religion inside and out because it wasn't necessarily a choice. And my whole thing is like I tie that, the whole idea of freedom of religion into my thoughts where if you want to be Catholic, if you want to be Jewish, if you want to be Buddhist, whatever, God bless you, do whatever you want to do. I just personally don't agree with somebody making the decision for you. And I feel like when you're Catholic, you're kind of like Catholic from before the time you can formulate a logical thought.
Yeah.
They take this baby, they dunk them into holy water, and, you've initiated into the Catholic religion. Well, if the way I looked at it, man, if my kids want to be Catholic, they'll be Catholic someday.
Mm-hmm.
When they can formulate a logical thought, and if they wanted to be some other religion, I'll still love my kids exactly the same. I just don't personally think that somebody should have to make the decision for you. Before you're old enough to think.
So where do you get this idea? Is there a resentment or will you look back and you think like, you felt forced? Why, because that's a very progressive thought.
I don't resent them. I think it's just the times changed the way we think from, my parents. Again, their parents raised them that way. And I know even though my parents raised me that way, times are different. Like people can make more open decisions nowadays than, it was a lot more closed-minded back then. Especially coming from like Italian neighborhoods in New York where like, you were going to church every Sunday with every single person that lived within a 20-block radius because the neighborhoods were segregated back then. It was like the Catholic Italians lived here, the Irish lived here. It was all like segregation. And we don't live in that society anymore. So I just don't feel that my kids should have the decision made. My kids are old enough to think for themselves and make good adult decisions, and they want to be Catholic, God bless you. I'll take you, introduce you to the priest, and you can get baptized.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't want to be, then I don't hold any kind of resentment. And I don't hold any resentment against my family for the way they were raised and the way we were raised either.
So I'm leading to something here. I do want to do this with Priscilla at some point because I think she has a very interesting look on her life from where she's from. But is she religious at all?
Same kind of deal. She's from a third world Spanish country, and again, Catholic is basically the main religion. And she was raised and did the sacraments, and I think my wife feels the same exact way I do. But she's not like a heavy practicing Catholic, and same. It's kind of like it's interesting because with our families being so different from each other, and different language separation and everything like that, they're still so similar. Like in those old school kind of religious ways, like her, her mother still, does prayer and everything around the holidays, and the groups of all the women praying, and same thing with my family. My grandmother still wakes up every day and prays the rosary, 20 times. You know what I mean? So it's just, God bless you. To each his own. It's just something that I'm not at this point in my life like kind of living by.
Yeah. So then. The thing that I very much so feel the same way with River is I'm going to provide knowledge, and that's what kind of this is. Eventually, I want to talk to people of religious faiths and of various and just provide knowledge, and you decide. I don't care what you do. But how is that? Has God ever been a discussion with Mia and Nico? How does that come about?
It's funny you just brought that up because even something that took place last night. There was and I gotta kind of touch something before I answer your question. There was a little bit of blowback in the family for.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes.
My kids being the first two kids to not be baptized. With the religious grandmother, my parents. And eventually they learned that, Jesse's not going to change his thoughts, and we got to just respect it. And we love our grandkids. My grandmother loves her grandkids just the same. And I have cousins that have kids, and all their kids are baptized. So there was definitely blowback, but
so they're the only in your entire big fucking family. They're the only ones.
Only two.
Wow. Okay,
baptized.
That's quite a big decision.
And they've kind of, in a sense, with recent family events, they've kind of almost become the outcasts because. Not only that, me and my sister were the only two that went to public school. All the other cousins, everybody went to private Catholic schools. But to go back to your question, last night we were down there, visiting in Tabernacle with the parents, and they were telling history, my dad's. They were telling the kids about their great grandparents on my dad's side who were no longer living. Neither one of them. They passed in the 90s, and it's interesting because it's not the first time it's happened that. When my kids will ask where somebody is that isn't here anymore, my first immediate answer is they passed away.
Mm-hmm.
But my parents' first immediate answer to them is they're in heaven. And that dropped once again. It's not the first time it happened, but it dropped because it happened once before when they were asking about the cat, our first cat, Jaeger, that died. Where's Jaeger? And, my mother will immediately go to, he's in heaven. And, I'll immediately, as soon as my mother says that every time, look at my daughter and say, he just passed away. And my mom, or dad, they don't say anything anymore when I do that, but I'm just kind of enforcing that, don't force it on my kids.
Yeah.
And they respect it, but they still try.
Yeah.
That's the stubborn Italian.
So then what is the response because heaven is not a concept that they've really...
Because they don't understand it necessarily.
Yeah, so then are they interested? Do they ask? How would you broach that subject?
They're more interested on what's on TV and fucking Paw Patrol and shit like that. I don't think religion is a heavy thought unless you push it into the kid's head. It's not something that they're really curious about.
So the question has never come up of how are we here? Stuff like that?
Right.
Okay.
Not yet. They're still, like I said, at 6 and 4, their biggest concern is what's for lunch and what's on TV right now.
How do you think you would go about that? Because, for example, for me, Ron and Gay, as you know, never pushed anything.
Right.
So then when I lost my grandfather at 13 or 14, that's when I said, what is this? And Ron said, well, here's the religions, and you decide.
Right. And I kind of see it similar. I'm gonna educate my kids, when they're old enough to understand that there are different beliefs and forms of religion out there. And in my personal opinion, other than maybe a choice few that are seriously intense, freaking anarchist theories and the satanic worshipers and that kind of stuff. I mean, other than that, I'm gonna explain to my kids that I don't think there's any real right answer out there. I think everybody feels in their own way that they're right, and you do whatever you feel is right. Educate yourself. Learn about all these religions. If my kids are going to be the first two Italian, practicing Jews in the family, then God bless them. If that's what they want to do, I'll support you. But I'm not for and I don't think other than all the bad publicity, going back to being Catholic, I don't think the Catholic religion is really all as harmful as some people make it out to be. I just personally don't agree with the first stage, baptism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that it has to be done when you're a baby, and that, you know, it has to be done by the family or a priest and that knows you and everything like that. Like, you know, if you want to get baptized at 15 years old, why, you know, there's people that do it and you can get baptized older, but it's like always just this Italian tradition thing to like the christening dress or the big family to do and the godparents. Like, you know, my kids have godparents, but they're not baptized.
Yeah.
You know, me and my wife don't look at it like that. Like they have to be baptized to have godparents.
No. Yeah.
It's like I said, it's just something I'm going to teach them. You know, educate yourself on different religions and beliefs, and whatever you feel is right is right.
Yeah, that was even though my parents never, you know, broached the subject of God in our lives until we asked and stuff, we did have a discussion, and it was uncomfortable with them that we didn't baptize River. And to my knowledge, she hasn't been, unless found, decided to do that herself. We had a long discussion about it, it is not my decision to make that for her, so we're not going to do it. And my dad, I remember, he was like, well, why don't you go to a Unitarian church and do it? Because they're the more, you know, liberal, whatever.
There's a lot more, like, outside churches popping up these days, I've noticed.
And I was like, well, you know, it was just funny. It was to me that, like, that was even a discussion. He even actually went to Fallon about it without me and was like, hey, but it just, you know, I strongly agree. It's not at all my decision to be making, and that comes with a whole lot of baggage, in my opinion, that's why, if you want to make that decision, pick up that baggage and go with it, fucking rock on.
You know, with them being Italian, it just comes, and again, the time that they were raised in, totally different time, raised by totally different people who, my grandparents were even, their upbringing was even stricter. They tried. They definitely tried. They definitely tried to push hard for it, and it was like a battle for the better part of a year, and then I think they just kind of accepted it.
Yeah.
And they don't treat my kids any different. My grandmother, the most religious person in the whole family, doesn't treat my kids any different. You know, like I said, it's just one of those things that I don't even really think a second thought about it. I don't feel guilty about not baptizing my kids. You know, I have a friend who just had a kid, and him and his wife are kind of in a very similar situation. Like, they're in that beginning stage where the baby's 2 months old, and believe it or not, that's when they start doing it. Like, a 2-3 month old baby is when they make the decision of this is going to be this baby's religion for the rest of his life. And she was sitting in my kitchen the other night and with him, and he's a very close friend of mine. She's very close with me too. And she wanted my take. We had this whole same conversation the other night. It's kind of odd that you brought it up. And she started crying in my kitchen. And I said to her, I'm not going to mention names or anything, but I said, look, you're in that stage. I felt this. Like, you feel a certain amount of guilt because you were raised this way. And you feel, you know, your family feels this is right. Your family's pushing you for it. You're just trying to keep everybody happy. And I said, I promise you, if you feel reservation, because on the other end, her husband, he feels the reservation, and she kind of does too. I said, don't let that guilt eat you up, because it will pass. Like, it'll be a little rough in the beginning, but you will see eventually they'll just give up and accept your kid for the way it is, and whatever your kid wants to do later is your kid's business.
So, on to slightly shifting gears, what do you think about we grew up in an incredibly rural area with nothing to do. I mean, I remember riding my bike to yours or Connor's house, and it would take 2 fucking hours. You know, what do you think that you know, now you're raising your kids in a very different atmosphere, in the sense that it's very much you know, you grew up basically on half a fucking farm, you know, and now you're raising your kids here. What do you think? Do you think that was a benefit that we were out in the middle of fucking nowhere, or?
Don't get me wrong. I love the town we're from. You know, close-knit community. Everybody kind of knows each other. People say Tabernacle is like the biggest little town in the world. But honestly, dude, I don't think it was great growing up out there because, like you just said, there was nothing to do.
Yeah, there's nothing to do other than drugs.
You were either riding dirt bikes or quads or getting fucking high.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, like when I got to college and I left that area and I came down to an area that was more city, like 15 minutes outside of Atlantic
Mm-hmm.
City. It was like a totally different world.
Mm.
And I remember like meeting people for the first time and going to parties and like seeing what people did and what they were all about, because there's always drugs and alcohol and stuff around. And I remember sitting back one night. I remember exactly where I was too. I was at a house party in Mays Landing and saying to myself, like, these guys are all trying this shit for the first time.
I know.
And I remember saying to myself, like, we fucking did this in 8th grade.
Yep.
Like, I'm not saying it was good.
No, but we had
the experience level of like when you grow up in a setting where there's nothing to do versus a setting where it's like a city-like area where there's tons of businesses and Atlantic City's right there. I was like, I almost felt like these people were like really sheltered.
Yes.
But then later in life, I realized like, no, we were just fucked up where we were from. Because again, there was nothing to do out there. You were either getting in trouble. If you weren't playing sports or something like that heavily, you were just basically up to no good, as we both know.
Mm-hmm. So on that, like, just self-serving here a little bit. Did you when you saw me start drugs, get real bad, stop, get into a semi-stable lifestyle, and then we stop talking, and then you come back into my life when the world is burnt down, and I'm you see me fight my way back up. Do you think back, like, was there? You were basically a parent to me back when we were in high school, because you were the only person my parents trusted me to go out with. And you basically babysat me. You changed me many a times because I was passed out, drunk, throwing up on myself. Do you, honestly, because, I don't think I need to say that, but do you think, did you see the progression coming? Did you think it would get that bad after knowing me for so long?
So, it's kind of, you just touched on like an emotional subject, man. Don't get me wrong, and I've always loved you since we hit it off really fast when we met. I think, if I remember right, like we were playing a lot of music. I was playing in bands, and you were kind of like setting up sound stuff for different bands around town. Music was kind of big when we got to the end of middle school and high school. I loved you, but I almost resented you in a lot of ways because I was like a 16-year-old parent.
Yeah.
I had to grow the fuck up real fast because I realized that in the beginning, it was just alcohol and like certain drugs here and there for you, but the alcohol was the worst.
Yeah, you knew me during alcoholic stage for sure. I was bad for a while, pints.
And when I realized that I couldn't stop you, I kind of like made a pact with myself, like the only thing I can do is really try to keep them alive. And back in those days, man, like, I'm not saying it was like, but I'm going back 16, 17 years. Recovery wasn't as big as it is today. Recovery was always there, but it didn't evolve until what it was until I think over the last like 15 years. Shit, I remember them reviving you in the back of an ambulance in your driveway, standing with your mom, like,
was that the night the alcohol, when I died from alcohol poisoning?
Yeah. And I remember like standing there as the 16-year-old kid keeping the adults together. Because like your parents were sheltered. They never saw your sister was a totally different entity than you were. I remember you that same night, like before it happened, you puked in a toilet and then put your fist through the back of the toilet tank. You fought the toilet. I resented you for that. But at the same time, I don't think I'd be the man I am today if you hadn't put me through that stuff young. So I'm not saying I don't want to say I benefited from your addiction, but in a way I'm about to go into this crazy career, and I think you almost like paved the way for that.
You certainly know how to deal with a crackhead.
It was crazy, man, because I was sitting there and, you didn't know what to do at a young age. Do I sit back and watch my best friend die, or do I do everything I can to keep him alive? And I never I knew you were going to get bad, and I knew it was going to get worse as we got older, and I wasn't going to abandon you. But I also knew that if I did, it would get worse really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that they teach you that in recovery, that like you can't stop a person from what they're going to do and the drugs they're going to do. But I think to a small extent, you did care about what you were putting me through. And I think you did stray away from going down certain roads with drugs because you knew that I was in the background.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I certainly couldn't hide it from you. I could hide it from everybody else, but
I don't know if maybe you had like a subconscious fear that, you know, if you went down certain roads with certain drugs that I might follow you, but whatever it was, it worked. Like, you know, smoking weed, drinking, you know, some pills here and there, like it was not justifying any of it, but it was the extent of it. And then, you know, came the big blowout, which I'm not going to go down that road right now. That's a whole other fucking podcast altogether. And I remember the moment when I realized like he's gone, he's out of my life, and he's not going to side with me in this whole situation. And the only thing I remember saying to myself was, that was actually probably one of the last times I actually prayed to whatever God I prayed to, when I said, just let him live. Because I knew once I was gone, it was going to be like the chains are off.
100%, yeah.
And I hoped that the people that you had sided with at the time, for as much hatred as there was in the whole circle at the time, I remember saying to God, like, just let them take care of him. If this is going to cost me my best friend, this whole situation, let them, you know, do what I did and keep him alive. And, you know, I think everything else is, you know, we all know the history there at that point. But I don't want to say that that's the reason that you went down the road of addiction, but I think to a certain extent, if I was around, it may not have gone down the way it did.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say either way, but
Right,
I do know that a lot of the times of what kept me from sticking a needle in my arm was the fact that I knew I couldn't hide it from you. I could hide it from Fallon, I could hide it from anybody in my life, but you would know. And then I know that when, you know, I don't remember much of the time because it happened very rapidly, but like when I went down that, there was no checks and balances in my life. And you had always been a checks and balance. So I think it probably would have played out, but I don't think I would have died 7 times in the process. But I mean, I you know, no regrets. Well, I certainly have regrets on the whole situation, but I mean, we don't need to go down that road. It was, so River knows, there basically, you know, there was a blowout, and because of life situations, I had to make a decision that I wasn't okay with, but kind of had to, and it put a wedge between us.
I blocked it out for a long time, but I think a big moment that really brought everything back up, and it was still a long time after that before we spoke again, but I remember the night my daughter was born. And I remember, like, I hadn't, honestly, it's not that, like, you forget, but, like, I had almost, like, just forgotten about the whole situation, and it was like we had moved on, we were leading separate lives, there was no contact, no social media contact, no, you know, I didn't know anything about your life anymore. And I remember that night in the hospital, you know, like a couple minutes after I held my daughter for the first time, I remember saying to myself, like, holy shit, Grant missed us. And that was like, that was hard.
Agreed. The same thing. I think I actually, if not reached out to you that night, it was very shortly after River was born that I sent a message out into the, you know, abyss to try and, I do remember that. That was a big moment where I was like, holy shit, you know, this is, you know, this is a little, it's gotten out of hand, you know. It's when you go so long with not talking, it's kind of almost harder to initiate, you know, with years gone by. And I remember that was a moment. I do remember that night. I was like, fuck, you know, this is crazy.
I remember, you know, I think it was sometime between my daughter being 4 and 5 was when I started hearing things. You know, we had a very close mutual friend that passed away a few years before that. Connor, the guy, rest in peace. and I remember sometime between me being 4 and 5 when I, like, it took me weeks to come to the decision, because I know once you unblock somebody from social media, it's like all of a sudden life comes back into existence again, because you start seeing everything again. And I remember, like, right the moment that I unblocked you, because everything I was hearing, and I saw you were in a rough spot. You were, at the time, I remember seeing posts about you and Fallon getting divorced, and I could just see your progression, or your degression, should I say? Fucking degression.
That's one thing I will say. Billy Brando is certainly wide open about his life. There is a obvious fucking downfall in his feed. That's why I haven't deleted the account. I do want River to actually at some day look at it if she wants.
I remember, kind of saying to myself, like, my son was 2 at the time, 2.5. Mia was going on 5, and I was like, what did this fucking come to? Like, I can't sit back and watch him die. My kids, like, don't know him, and I couldn't live with that anymore. And I remember I didn't reach out to you first, and I was on the outside, so I didn't know the whole situation. I didn't know where your life had gone to. I just saw how bad it was. And I remember making the big mistake of reaching out to Fallon first, who I was not her favorite person by any means. And I don't hold any resentment against Fallon or anything like that. She was a mom, and she did what she had to do. God bless her. She's a fucking super mom for doing what she did.
Absolutely.
It had to be done. And, I thought that's in some level that it was right for me to reach out to her first. And she was not receptive at all. Shut me out. It was, and I get it.
Well, she was also very angry at me at the time.
Yeah, and I know you guys. I think you guys had literally. I think the ink was still wet on your divorce papers. Yeah. Like you had
and
literally
like 40th relapse still.
Right. You were, and I knew. Just from the grapevine, I knew you were relapsing constantly. You were in a bad spot. And after she wasn't receptive, I think like another 2 weeks went by, and I asked when her reaction was as strong as it was, towards me reaching out. I remember saying, "All right, Alan, this was a bad idea. What's dead is dead. What's gone is gone, and just let it lie." And then I don't even remember necessarily what it was, but you posted something one night, and that was like right there. I was like, that's it. It was like 2 weeks after I had reached out to Fallon, and I was like, that's it. I can't. And I just messaged you. And I remember like you were like, you were reserved as hell. You were like, what the fuck?
Yeah, the little backstory on that. I was in Liberation Way at the time, and
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and I had a phone hidden in the rehab because I snuck it in, but we had just,
of course you did.
Yeah, we had just got phone privileges given to us, so I had to swap the phones during lunchtime to make sure that they knew that I wasn't hiding the phone, and I had turned on my swapped phone, and your message literally came in like 2 minutes after I had turned the phone on. I was like, what the fuck? That's out of nowhere. So yeah, no, I'm very glad that it went down that way. How do you feel? I mean, it couldn't have been easy because I mean, at least at that time when we first started talking, I was under the quote unquote care of a rehab. We all know how that all went down, but
another podcast.
But in that, you met me, and I think I was in the point of getting towards 90 days, and then seeing me die down, up and down, up and down. I mean,
the first thing we did was, the typical fucking Jesse and Grant fashion. We've been talking for 10 minutes, and what better way to re-solidify our fucking friendship? Let's go get a tattoo. And it was like, I remember walking in, we went to the Philadelphia Tattoo Convention, I think, was the first time we actually hung out in 7 years. Mm-hmm. I remember walking in like, what the fuck are you doing? I was saying to myself, like, we're, okay, whatever. Yeah, what better way to, this is what me and Grant were all about. Let's do something fucking extreme. And we went and got tattoos.
Matching.
matching. Yeah.
Although I still have a little bit of resentment towards you for not doing that. I love you. I know on our tattoos.
I think you had texted your mom while we were at the tattoo convention and said we were going to get lightsabers on our dicks. And I remember your mom making the very cold comment that they're in the off position because they're not going to fit.
Okay.
But you know what, man? No regrets, and I think that was like the greatest way to kick off after 7 years of no contact. And then just fast forwarding a little from there, you know, like you said, from that moment, which I think was, God, this January will be like 2 years. Holy shit.
Yeah, I know. It goes by fast.
That first 9 months, I almost thought, like, what a big fucking mistake you made talking to myself, because you were at that, like, 90-day mark when I first came in, back into your life, and then you just started relapsing and coming back and relapsing and coming back and relapsing. And at a certain point, I said to myself, like, is this my fault? Like, I was like, he seemed like he was on the right track, and then, you know, all of a sudden he's like an emotional roller coaster. I was like, maybe I got to back down again, but then I learned a lot about addiction in a very short period of time. I think I read like 3 books on fucking addiction when we first started talking again, to try to understand where you were at. And I kind of started realizing, like, all right, it's not me. It's definitely something that's ingrained in his genes, and there was trauma and things of that nature that were causing it from your childhood, things that, as close as we were, that I never even knew about. You know, so...
Yeah, in general, just 90 days for me, 90 to 102 days was never good. I mean, I think I relapsed, 20 times at that fucking mark. And
I learned that was the mark, you know, that 90 to 120 day mark is like, it's not just him, it's any addict. Like, that getting to that part is always like the easy part, and then everything after that is where it starts going downhill again, because emotions start setting back in, and the guilt of everything that happened. I don't think you believed that I was genuine even after getting yourself tattooed until about, 6 months into us talking again.
No, I agree. There was a long period, well, because I had been, fucked over by so many people, I was like, there's got to be an ulterior motive here. But yeah, I mean, after really getting to know your kids, then the trust started coming back. You know, not that I didn't trust you, but there was like, I remember I was like, he's after something. Why is he doing this? You know, but that was
honestly nothing I could have taken. Like, there, you know what I mean? It was, not holding it against you, because again, I wouldn't change a thing because of where we are right now. But like, I had a lot to lose. You know, I'm married, 7-8 years. I've got 2 beautiful kids. I have a career that I've been in, 11 years, and everything going great. And then here I go, start trudging into like, crazy fucking situations and ghettos and pulling you out of places and shit. And it was like, I remember one night at like 2 o'clock in the morning, fighting my way down towards, I forget where the fuck you were, somewhere Yardley, Pennsylvania or some shit. Like, it was not a good area. Like, what the fuck am I doing? But, I wasn't going to do anything that put my family at risk, or my kids or my wife, or anything I had created, and somehow I was able to balance the two out. And I haven't had this conversation with her, but I really owe my wife a lot, because I try to look at it from her perspective.
Oh, it must have been absurd.
Here's this guy that she has no fucking clue who he is. He wasn't at my wedding. He missed my kids being born. He hasn't been even a remote thought. She's never even really heard me fucking talk about you. I kept it all like buried. And then all of a sudden her husband's leaving in the middle of the night, and like, she must, God knows what the hell she fucking thought, like at the time, before she knew you. And now, she loves you like a brother. But I mean, like, I probably owe her a lot, because I put her through a lot.
It's a lot of trust. It's funny that you say that. I'm thinking about it now, and yeah, that is a lot of trust that she has, of like, because it is. I mean, I was a nobody at that time, so it's like, why is my husband putting himself through this? Because I can't imagine, but I can certainly relate in dealing with people whom I love now, and trying to get them better, or not trying to get them better, trying to offer them help, and it going south. incredibly taxing on your psyche, incredibly taxing. I can't, and these are people that I care about and I love, but not like family, so I can't imagine a family member, from your angle, looking at a family member doing that. It's got to be difficult. So I greatly appreciate everything you've done.
I think a big part of it for me was, even saying to myself, what the fuck are you doing? You're putting yourself at risk for this person who, yeah, it was a past life, but you guys haven't had any contact. You're totally different people. And I think, going back to the whole point of this podcast, I don't think I would have done what I did if it wasn't for my kids and being a dad. Because I remember saying to myself one night, and I knew at that point you had virtually no relationship with River. And I remember saying to myself, he's missing this. He is missing the greatest thing that's ever happened to me in my life, and there's got to be a way to get him back to wanting to be a dad.
Those kids have sparked that again. That act reignited that flame in me. I love those kids so much, and I've
never even met your kid, and I love her.
I'm very grateful because I had given up on being a dad. I was like, it's just not going to happen, and she's better off without me. And I've learned through those kids that is incredibly absurd concept.
The first time you said that to me, that she was better off without you, that was when I knew that I had to take the risk of bringing you into my kid's life. Because you needed to experience it again, you had just forgot, River, if you're listening at any point, this fucking guy loves you more than anything. I know he doesn't have a lot of contact with you, and it's very minimal right now, but he would step in front of a moving train for you, just like I would for my kids. And hopefully one day, in the, I'm sure, distant future, but one day we're all going to be sitting kind of laughing about this.
I agree. So how do you plan on educating your children? Because I know that we both grew up, thankfully, in a very wonderful educational system. For being a public school, it was actually very valuable, I think. How do you plan on going about educating them in general? What are your concerns as a father of things that school isn't going to teach them that you want to teach them? Because that's something that's literally the point of this podcast.
We were kind of raised in that. I don't want to trash the way our parents raised us, because they did the best that they could with what they had in front of them. And I love my parents. I love your parents, second parents, and they did what they thought was right. And our whole generation was raised with that, you can do anything you want mentality, and the world is not a mean and scary place, and it's all fucking sunshine and rainbows, but at the end of the day, dude, it's how many kids in our generation drained themselves financially going to schools for things that they can't even get jobs in now. And I want my kids to really think hard, when it comes to their education, and I hate to say it, dude, but from 40 years ago till now, there's a couple of constants that have remained the same with career and financial stability. It's there's basically 6 main careers out there that you can make a really good living at, and other than that, there's a lot of bullshit that they talk these kids into going to school for that they're never going to have a career in.
So how do you deal with that now? Because I know we've just had conversations over stuff about, that mentality of putting a bubble around your child is probably worse than it was when we were a kid.
Yeah.
How do you handle that now? Because you have to, your kids are now in daycare, and they're getting introduced to that fucking life. How do you handle that?
They're still at a young age where right now it's just about what toy are we going to play with at this point in time, and whose birthday party are we going to, this weekend. And they haven't hit that that real social stage yet, where it's like, all right, well, these are my friends, those are his friends, and they haven't. They're still each other's best friends.
Yeah.
They learn a lot from each other because they are really close in age. I'm thankful that my kids are that close in age. It's hard for me to answer that at this point.
Is that even a concern of yours? Is that something? Because, for example, sometimes I will lay in bed at night and be like, how the fuck am I going to pay for this kid's college?
Oh, I think about that constantly, but at the same time, I don't, but please don't take this as me bragging or anything. I'm not, but here's me, this guy that barely finished college, barely has a shitty degree in something, by the way, that I did not end up doing as a career. Go fucking figure. And I personally think great. I've created an outstanding life for my family.
100%.
I live in a house that is way bigger and nicer than I ever thought I would actually ever be able to afford. I created a career in something I totally never thought I could, and to me, I finished a career already, because as you know, I just quit my job because I'm moving on to another career after 11 and a half years of doing the same thing. Personally, I'm just one of those people that feels like that you don't necessarily need a college degree.
Agreed. Yes,
it helps. It goes a long way. But my whole thing with college, that I think, it sounds a little closed-minded when I'm about to say this. I'm going back to, like I said, the 6 main careers since the beginning of time. That just, it's almost not worth it to pay for it anymore if you're not going to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or the main careers that just constantly have financial stability.
Yeah.
And I think that's all anybody really wants, is financial stability.
Yeah.
One guy's definition of financial stability and my definition might be totally different, but financial stability is what lets you sleep at night.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in a world of inflation where just it just keeps getting more expensive to live, and it's not realistic, in my opinion, anymore to say that you can't have a career and you just do whatever you want, and you've got to have some type of financial stability just to survive in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also brings a lot on when it comes to addiction. Is just without financial stability, it leads downhill real quick. I want my kids to know that I will help them do whatever it is they want to do in any way I possibly can. I'm not a millionaire. I'm not going to be able to, I know I'm not going to be able to shell out, $1 million for them to go to Ivy League schools or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. But whatever I can do and however I can guide them to get to where they want to be, and where it's not going to be about what I want. It's going to be about what they want. That's
on that. You just left a major position, good paying, something that you know very well, something that you're very good at, and you're now going into a complete, you were a manager at a car sales place, and now you're going to be a cop. What are your, part of this is when you're done and you graduate and you become a cop, I want to do this again to try and just kind of document the change. What are your fears? Because I'm sure you're fucking terrified right now.
I was raised by a cop, so the reason I'm doing what I'm doing, it kind of comes from just the way I was raised. And I honestly, one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't do it when I was younger, and that, I'm in my 30s and I'm going to walk into a police academy with guys that are all in their early 20s. One of my biggest fears is that, just the physical aspect of what I'm about to walk into in 2 days. You create this career, and like I said, I have no regrets about the car business and what I accomplished. And I basically got myself to a point where I could run any single department in a dealership on
Mm-hmm.
my own. I was running multiple departments for that matter for a long time. People working under me, people respected me. I didn't realize how many people respected me and loved working for me until I was walking out the door, and you're with them every day, and then they start saying it when you're leaving. It's emotional. But I think that, when you're making that much money at a young age, and money is not everything, and I realize that now, in my 30s, but at a young age, it's like, wow, this is fucking easy. I'm looking at myself and a lot of the people I grew up with and seeing how far ahead I was of a lot of other people, and I tried to get out a couple times, and it's like, I hate saying it, but money is the root of all evil, in my opinion, because, they wave that carrot in front of your face when you're trying to leave, and it's like, all right, I'll stay for that. One of my biggest fears is just the lifestyle I've created because of that career, may now suffer. Very thankfully, I have a wife who is unbelievable.
She's an amazing woman.
She doesn't care if we've got the 3,000 square foot house in the high tax area with the amazing schools, or if we're living in an apartment. I guess that's a benefit of marrying a girl from a third world country, but you get off easy at holidays and stuff. They don't expect much. Love you, babe. That's one of my biggest fears, is just the financial change. Taking an enormous pay cut to do something dangerous, and
that's what's going to be my thing. Is like I used to run where you're going to be a cop, and I've been in that. I've been the criminal that you're going to be chasing, and it's bad. Is there a fear there, or is it because you were raised with a cop? Like it's I'm sure it's a fear, but
so I was always kind of raised as like a first responder in a sense. I'm that guy. I'm not looking for a fucking hero badge or anything, but like I'm that guy that I seem to always be in the fucking right place at the right time.
Like, I know, it's crazy.
It is weird. Like, people roll a car right in front of me.
Yeah, it's
when
crazy.
I'm driving or on my front lawn.
Yeah.
And I'm always going to be that first guy running in to try to help someone, because if I was sitting there dying on the side of the road or something, I want somebody to help me. And that's just, I think, how he raised me from a young age, that there's no panic factor for me. And I think that's why I kind of missed my calling in this career. That, like, there's a lot of people out there that just can't handle that kind of thing when it goes down, or they panic. And I'm the first one that's just like, my head is completely together and everybody's looking at me for what to do. And I think that, to go to your question, like, if you are scared of that kind of stuff, that's why some people are cops and some aren't. Don't get me wrong, I've had, my run-ins and everything over the years, and I'm not saying that all cops are that way. There are good cops and there are bad cops. That just comes from training and attitude, I think. But, if you're scared, I don't think you were meant to be a cop. And I'm not saying that a cop was the only outlet for me. It just happens to be the easiest, again, because, it was readily accessible. I took tests, I scored high, I guess. It's amazing to me. I didn't realize how much of a process it was. Like, people on the media and stuff, they're kind of totally wrong when, they do not just slap a badge and a gun on anybody that asks for it. It is stressful.
Yeah, it's the process you've gone through the last couple months is crazy.
I mean, it's not just months, the last year. Yeah. Psychological exams, psychological tests, competency tests, IQ tests, background investigations. They went door to door to my neighbors. I mean, you name it, they did it. I must have pissed in a cup 75 times in the last 6 months. It's amazing, and then to think to myself, too, that there are still guys that get through that process that somehow trick the system, but it's really not easy. And I know, one of my other biggest fears is, my wife knows me. She knows who I am. She knows how I've been since she married me. And one of my biggest fears is that I know this process is going to change me. The next 5 months of this academy, they're going to break me down and mold me into something completely different. And I just hope that when I come out of it at the end, that I'm still something that my wife is somewhat attracted to and devoted to, in a sense. I've read books on this, and it's like you go into this tunnel like a production line, and you do come out on the other side like almost a totally different person. I want to try to hang on to who I am in this process and not lose too much of myself.
Do you think a lot of that'll come from the fact that you're coming home every night compared to being, the other thing you were going to do, you weren't going to be home?
All departments are different. Some academies make you live there. Some you can go home every night. That's almost like a 50-50 mix, and it doesn't really change the job or how the department is. I guess some departments feel like when you come home you're distracted, but I think in a big way that'll kind of help me, turn it off every day and come back to normal life for a little while. But it's definitely going to be a life-changing experience, again, coming from a career in finance into this.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to what I said, this is probably my biggest regret was not doing it younger.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, you live and learn, and it is what it is. I have my reasons, and I'm confident it's all going to work out the way it needs to.
So then on that, I'd like to kind of end this with, if I was able to put young Jesse, whatever that manifests in your head, I don't care what age, whatever you see, you had a chance to give him a piece of advice that you wish you got at that age. What are you thinking?
Honestly, just be aware of the world. Be aware of the world, and it is not the sunshiny rainbow place that you're being raised to think it is. Don't go to fucking culinary school. No matter how much you think you want to, don't go to culinary school. Would have said that to him, and probably would have told him don't cut out of Grant's life, because that again was one of my biggest regrets.
And then lastly, who's the favorite kid? I'm joking.
You. My third child.
Yeah, certainly.
I love you, dude. I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of where you are right now.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You're a big motivation as to why I kept my shit together, and I'm very grateful for the fact that you brought me into a good company. I do think we have I now have a good boss. Is there? I'm going to throw another one in there. What do you want to say to future you? It's 6 months, right? The whole process.
It's 4 months and 3 weeks, so it's basically 5 months.
So in 5 months, when you've gone through this rigorous life re-altering, what do you want to tell Cop Jesse?
I want to tell him, regardless of what this next 5 months does to you, to your psyche, to who you just remember who you are. Remember what you went through and where you came from and how you got to this point. And the biggest thing I think I want to tell future Jesse is, because you always have that thing when you start a new career that you want to do well, and you want to impress somebody, and you want to make like that impact, going into something new. This is a lot different than the other jobs I've had in the career I had, where, not saying that you're scared of, I'm scared of what I'm going into, but I have a lot to lose. I got a wife and 2 kids and a lot of good people in my life, and just don't be too eager to, put yourself in a situation where you could potentially get hurt or killed. Think, which is how I got to this point in this hiring process, because I can think with a clear head and just make the right decisions, and don't do anything fucking stupid.
So yeah, that's it. River, I love you as always.
Love you, River. Can't wait to meet you.